Hi there, how you doing? I'm Colin. Welcome. Hope you're well. I see the state of things today, and I wanted to talk about my opinions and my experience as a U.S. Army veteran. So here we go. I don't like what happened with Venezuela, and I feel that operation and what's happening in Iran currently are unlawful, and everybody in the chain of command is duty bound to say no. You guys swore an oath to the Constitution, so I would greatly appreciate if you'd step up and defend it. I'd also like to remind you that targeting infrastructure necessary to civilian life is unlawful. Okay, now before going further, I am aware some of my stories do give off my uncle works at Nintendo vibes, but I'm doing my best to be honest, and I'm going to be stripping back a lot of details so nobody is explicitly being called out. I personally joined because I was an angry kid and I wanted to learn how to fight. Being completely honest, I sucked at everything when I first started, and I cried more than a few times in basic training. I had a panic attack on top of Eagle Tower. Range cadre slammed my Kevlar into the footing until I calmed down. And then I was told I had 10 seconds to get off the tower. They skipped numbers. I was still off before they were done. All you need is a little bit of motivation sometimes. I learned that I don't like explosives. Rocket launchers are dangerous. Never stand behind one when it's being fired, unless you like being well done. One of my favorite jokes is actually about rocket launchers. It's from the movie Commando. Radon Chong comments that the instructions were written on the side, and I think it's funny because it's true. Grenades are what really did it, though watching a Claymore mine go off with the knowledge that you have to be within the blast area to detonate it really doesn't help on that part. So we went to the grenade range, and we were standing in line behind a big concrete wall with plexiglass windows. And so I finally get to the end of the line. I get my grenade, and as I walk up to the station I'm thrown from, I look at the wall, and it looks like a porcupine's ass. And I suddenly feel like I don't want to hold a little ball of death, and I was happy to throw it. Explosives are for emergencies only. That's my opinion. Too much collateral damage. I don't really think anything else of note happened. My right foot swelled up about 2.5 weeks before graduation. I didn't really concern myself with it. We did our 10K ruck to our final field training exercise. That was fun. Our drill sergeant took a group that accidentally captured 4th Platoon's guidon. We thought 2nd Platoon attacking was 4th coming to get their guidon back, which led to a brawl between us and 4th Platoon on the final day, and it was kind of funny. After that, we did the night fire exercise, and then the 15K ruck march, and our final Army physical fitness test. After all that was done, I go to get my foot checked because the swelling hadn't gone down, and it turned out that I had a completed stress fracture in the 3rd metatarsal of my right foot, and ironically, I would get the same injury in my left foot in AIT. Not a whole lot happened after graduation through AIT. Resident Evil 4 and Metal Gear Solid 3 came out. I had to play on a portable DVD player. My roommates and I had fun. One of them would actually translate what the Ganados were saying in Resident Evil 4 in his very flat monotone, and it was just hilarious. Eventually, I had to get out of there, and my first duty station was in Kuwait, where I was at the communications hub for both OIF and OEF. I had no idea what any of the equipment was, and it was sink or swim, so my first section sergeant didn't really like me. I don't necessarily blame him because I was 18 and an asshole like a lot of 18-year-old boys. And he would just kind of blow his top at me randomly. And I just put up with it because, for the most part, I was just used to it. I also had a coworker that I did not like because they had a tendency to roll their eyes and give a heavy sigh whenever asked to do something, which I felt was grossly inappropriate and unprofessional. And also, they once said that if I got promoted before them, they would scream. But anyways, one day this section sergeant asks me and this coworker to go do our PMCS on the vehicle for our section. Of course, the battery for the vehicle is dead, which means you can't check absolutely everything. I insisted that we check everything that we possibly could, and she just wanted to do it fast and get back in. And I insisted because if we just do it right, he would be less likely to yell at us. So, because I didn't want us to get in trouble for something stupid. So we do all the checks as I ask, and we go back inside, and he drags us back outside, telling us that we didn't do it right. We're sitting there, and he's PTing us in Kuwait in the middle of summer. I was fine with it for the most part, but my coworker was starting to show signs of heat injury and falling out. So I got up. I told him that the situation was inappropriate and that we had done everything that he kept suggesting. And so he got back in my face and was trying to get me to swing on him, but I am not dumb enough to swing on an NCO first. He was gone shortly after that, and a character we will call Big Boss. He was Special Forces. He was actually my first mentor who made me feel like I was worth something for once. It was a huge moment for me when he was giving me my counseling and said that I was more knowledgeable in 2 months than he was after 6. We had some fun in the office. I ended up with some nicknames. There was Doogie, Matt Damon, Wad, the Comsec Kid. We did a birthday thing because 4 of us in the office had birthdays within 2 days of each other. We also had a period where we got really into Command and Conquer Generals. So one day they have me play against the coworker that I did not like. We established our rules of engagement, one being no attacks for 10 minutes, and so we get started. Nobody was watching me play because some bets were made, and so 10 minutes pass. Big Boss giggles, everyone else has no idea what just happened, and I had just bombed her power plants to disable defenses and had stealth helicopters in position. No, I'm not going to debate the ethics of doing war crimes in a video game against somebody you don't like. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, and a pivotal moment did eventually happen. I walked into the office for work one night, and 2 of the day shift guys were talking about their futures, and Big Boss was sitting in the big comfy chair and just listening to them, and the day shift guys had brought up they wanted to apply for Special Forces. Big Boss goes ahead and says, you'd both get rejected. They'd take Colin and put him on steroids. I was a little taken aback by the statement, and I didn't have any interest in doing steroids, and so I just kind of asked, are you telling me I should apply for Special Forces? Of course, Big Boss looked me directly in the eye and says, you freaking better. I took that and kind of secretly ran with it and started privately studying and training and kind of had fun with it. So applying for specials was basically first couple of steps for what I might want to do. And so I started working on my range score up in my APFTs, frequently scoring above 70 until I busted my knees. Big Boss and my LT worked hard to get me promoted to E4. And, of course, my coworker got promoted as well. I did get blood rank, though. Wasn't the worst pain I've ever felt. First sergeant called it off after about 2/3 of the company had already done it. And I was just kind of like, I don't care. And next up, I went off to Germany, and I was not very well behaved. I had a tendency to drink a lot, and I was 20 years old in Germany. What do you think happened? I apologize to basically everyone I've known before in my early 20s. I sucked. I'm a little bit better now. But the plan was to basically do special forces, maybe go over to CIA or whatever, infiltration, sabotage, assassination. I don't know. Eventually maybe retire and or go freelance. Never really let my family know about it. Basically planned to go to my grave, my family never knowing what I did. Kind of like my Uncle Larry. I felt like I was being encouraged to be the worst version of myself, even at the cost of not feeling like a person anymore, and I was okay with it. Nobody ever really cares about my feelings. I act like a goofy bastard to be likable, and just never felt like I belonged. And I'm okay with being the butt of the joke, because it's basically been my entire life. I have to set my feelings aside to do what someone else says is best. I never really cared what people thought of me. One of my favorite stories involves the NCO who taught me about polar bear kung fu. He shot me in the testicle. It was a paintball game, and yeah, it hurt. I laid in the tall grass for the rest of the day and took a nap. Yeah, I didn't really like who I was, but I just let the fact that I was protective of the people around me and my friends convince me that I was, a bad person for good reasons. I helped out where asked. I did what I was told to do. I didn't know what else I was supposed to do otherwise. I was in my CO's vehicle during our convoy training, and whenever we had to get out to return fire, I basically kept the pop-up targets pinned down, and it got to the point where my CO stopped even trying to fire and just started handing me her magazines. And we also had someone threaten to take my firing pin, and our first sergeant basically told them off. That was fun. Didn't hurt my feelings at all. And if you want to know what kept me from actually going down that route, it was my ex, because she was my best friend. I'm not going to pretend our relationship was perfect. We argued, and it was not a healthy relationship, and I can see that now. But she did make me feel like I could be myself with her. And she genuinely made me feel like she cared about me. And we made so many jokes about music. If you need to know why we broke up, she told me that I would have to stop quoting Hall and Oates songs. And I told her I can't go for that. Yeah, I thought I'd go with a joke. I'm not telling you the actual reason. Anyway, she was someone I was comfortable talking to about anything, and I did. And I talked to her about what I had discussed with Big Boss, and basically I hadn't covered what my future plans were, but she had decided to talk me out of applying for SF, and because I care about her, I promised that I wouldn't do it. We ended up having a major fight before I deployed, and we broke up. Don't bash her for the time period in which she left me. it was rough for both of us. She's a good person, and I don't want her being judged by something that happened a long time ago, because it's been years, and it's none of your business. So I basically pretended nothing was up, didn't think anybody noticed that I got dumped and that I was basically just out. And I thought I was going to be fine. I won our game of ball tap within 2 weeks. I was respected by my chain of command. I thought I'd be fine. So we get to Iraq, and I was not fine because I was a different person. I didn't want to be angry anymore. I was listening to local nationals and didn't like what was happening over there. Everything kind of came to a head the week after Easter in 2008. One of the insurgent leaders said to bomb the snot out of us. It was not a fun week. Turns out that my response to people trying to kill me is getting mad. And I don't really like that because I was incredibly angry, and it made me really uncomfortable because I did not have an outlet for that anger. After that, and seeing a lot of stuff that I just found ridiculous, I felt done. I decided that I'd be getting out. I was tired of being angry, and I was tired of being a terrible person. So I did what I had to do in order to get through, and I came out of it trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I still haven't really figured it out yet. I've done stuff since then. I went to college for forensic science, worked as a janitor for a bit, learned home repair. I also learned about myself. I have a better view of who I am as a person. One thing that I would like to do is burn down the Manosphere. That just seems like fun, and those guys are jerks. I spent most of my life just trying to be left alone. I grew up in the same era as jerks like Andrew Tate. They were everywhere like they're cockroaches. Most of them are the same person that they were in high school, except that they're dumber because they've forgotten or never learned most subjects in school. They encourage young men to be stupid, irresponsible jerks while stealing their money, making the young men even more miserable. It's cruelty industrialized on a massive scale for the profit of men who have no life skills. That's not okay in my book, because they want to be worshipped for being completely useless. My advice to young men: go do something you actually enjoy. Try a different field of work if you're unhappy with your job. Have some fun for once. The world sucks partly because the Manosphere weirdos. Do your part to make it suck less. Okay, I think that's about all I have to say. Thanks. Bye.